Hello, my friends, and welcome back to Where Wendy Creates. Today we are going to make a throw quilt for a man's couch. So I've gotten my men's looking or outdoorsy type fabric, and I've poured it all in a pile here, just kind of thrown it around, maybe even used some fabrics from the last quilt, and see if we can't come up with a nice, very fast throw quilt, and we'll see how fast we can get that throw quilt completed today using a stack of fabrics that I think would be great in a throw quilt for a couch in a bachelor pad. So I've also thought we would just go ahead and cut out maybe 10-inch squares, wrap them with the 2.5-inch strips. I've got a couple of jelly rolls and a lot of stragglers, and we're going to go ahead and see if we can't whip that quilt up real fast for us. Let's have fun. Okay, so I've cut out some 10-inch squares, and we're going to go ahead and cut out some more, and then we are going to start sewing because I want those 2.5-inch strips trimmed around the different blocks. Okay, so now we are going to open up our jelly roll and audition it, and I've got a row of colors and a jelly roll of these beige and browns. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and open up this jelly roll, take a look at our different colors to see which one looks best with what fabric block. All right, we are going to go ahead and commence to sew, and we have our different color that we're going to use for this stack, and we're going to go ahead and start sewing them on and making some colors. I want at least one of each of these blocks in the quilt, but as you've already seen, we've got about a dozen other patterns that we're going to audition as well, cut up already. So let's start on this stack. And this one train that I want to use in my quilt is a little bit too small, so we're going to go ahead and put 1.5-inch strips around it, and then we'll trim it down to the proper size and put the 2.5-inch strips on. Where there's a will, there's a way. And again, the goal is to get all of my blocks the identical same size, and then we can add the 2.5-inch strips. So if you really fall in love with a pattern and it is just way the wrong size, don't let that stop you. And we're going to trim off our rounds. Go ahead and make sure your seams are laying flat, so finger press those down. And then we are going to continue with our strips. And I hold my threads when I get going. And I make sure both pieces of fabric are right sides facing each other and they're perfectly lined up. I want to hold my 1/4-inch seam as I go. See how I'm even holding it right up to the end because you do not want your fabric to torque. Do not let go. Hold on to it till the end. You are protected. You're away from that needle. Okay. pull that thread, trim it, trim my first border to size, finger press those two pieces over, and then get ready to add down the other side. And again, right sides together. Finger press that seam up. And again, just take your fingernail, go across it, make sure that is level. And then we are going to sew our 1/4 inch seams. And I did not hold my threads, I should have. But alas, I was lucky. Okay. And we're going to finger press those seams open, and we are going to go down our last side. We'll take it over to the cutting board, and we will trim it down to match all of our other pieces, and then continue. And I just unthreaded my needle. Okay, so we are auditioning the couple of blocks with a couple of pieces of the 2.5 inch. And we're gonna go ahead and sew on the next block. So I think I'm going to use the light blue with the bright block here. We'll go ahead and line it up, right sides together. We're going to trim off the selvage, and we're going to sew it on. So if you don't trim it beforehand, just make sure you have the selvage up higher than the piece that you are sewing. Make sure you line up the two edges, and we're going to go ahead and hold our thread as we start. Going to back stitch to lock that in, and then we're going to go across the entire piece, right sides together, right on that edge, keeping our 1/4 inch seam. And we're going to lock in that thread, come over, turn it upside down, and then we can trim off the excess of the 2.5 inch strip to where we make sure that it is perfectly straight, and trim off our selvage. And then we're going to go ahead and turn the block over. We're going to open up our seams. We're going to just finger press them now. We'll bring them over to the ironing board once we have the blocks done, and we will iron those. So we're going to go ahead and take right sides again on our 2.5 inch strip, determine which is which, and we are going to put them face to face and go ahead and sew our 1/4 inch seam. I like to lock in my stitch as I start and then straighten my piece. You can use a couple of pins to keep it perfectly aligned, or just go slow and pay attention as you go. And we're going to do the same thing. We're going to turn it upside down, lay our pieces flat together with no torquing. And we're going to trim off that 2.5 inch piece. We're going to open up our block. We're going to finger press those seams open. And then we're going to go on to our third side. And put the 2.5 inch strip on. And again, we're going to have right sides together. So always make sure you're paying attention to the right sides and the wrong sides of your 2.5 inch strip. You're going to lay them together. And I'm going to flip this over. And sew down our 2.5 inch strip together. Hold our strings as we start, lock stitch. Watch our quarter inch seams. All right. And we're going to continue for the fourth side. Okay, so now to audition which color we want going with this block. And I'm thinking the white is out. This is not as white, but I think we're going to skip down here to some tans to decide. And of course, I've got different looks here. Kind of like it matching this part right in here. So I'm thinking about these two. So let's see how that looks. How does that look? I think that's what we're going to go with. Hello, my friends, and welcome back to Where Wendy Creates. We are going to continue to put the borders around each of our 10-inch blocks for our man cave couch throw. Because even men like to snuggle, they just want to do it with masculine stuff around. What do you think? All right, so we have put on the first 2.5 inch strip. And I'm going to go ahead and trim the one. And then I'm going to bring over the piece and I'm just going to finger press these two seams down. So I'm going to lay that on my table. I'm going to finger press it down so we can go ahead and put the next row on and we know which direction the seams want to go. All right, and I drop my piece. Okay, so I have my 2-inch strip, I have my block, and I'm going to put right sides together, face to face. And I'm going to line it up with the top of my block, run it right down the side of my block, and do my 1/4 inch seams. And I know my 2.5 inch strip and my block, the seam is going down towards my block away from my 2.5 inch strip. We're going to line up those pieces, put my foot down, hold my starter threads, do a quick little back stitch, line everything up right nice, and then we're going to go our 1/4 inch seam all the way down. Lock in my stitch at the end, pull my needle up, trim my threads, turn it upside down, trim off my 2.5-inch strip. And again, you can easily do these at the cutting board before you come to the table. Just know that with a 10-inch block, you need 2 of them that are 10 inches and 2 of them that are 12.5 inches to go onto your block. And I just like to alternate my corners, so I do it right when I'm at the sewing machine. And again, you line up your edges, line up your top, and then we are going to put our 1/4 inch with our threads, back stitch, and go right down the top, right sides together. And I want to hold my block all the way to the end so I don't torque and veer short of a 1/4 or longer than a 1/4 inch seam on either side. And although I trim my threads as I go, you're always going to have more threads to trim in the process of pressing, and undoubtedly when you go to quilt the final piece. Quilt meaning put the 3 sides together at the same time. All right, we're just going to go ahead and do the 4th side the same way we did these 2 sides. And again, we're going to trim off our selvage. And our selvage is that part that is a little bit thicker near the edges of the fabric. Make sure I have right sides together. And we're going to square up that top corner, making sure all of our pieces match. And then we're going to sew right down our piece, that 1/4 inch seam. One more block is ready to go over and be ironed before we start piecing all of our pieces together. So we're just going to finger press this side down so that it's easier once we get to the ironing board to keep all of our seams going the right direction. And voila, I think that tannish brown goes real nice with this block. Very good. All right, throw that to the side and start the next. And we're going to audition this piece with our different 2.5 inch strips. And I am leaning towards the darker, but there's more brown than there is gray. There's more black than there is gray. So I think I'm going to rule those out. The whites and the tans, beige is definitely too light. But I'm looking at my 3 different browns here and deciding, and I think I'm going to go with the middle brown. So let me pull these 2 strips out, and then we'll put them with the block and do that final audition before we start. I like it already. What do you think? I like it. All right, so let's go ahead and line that up. Okay, so we have selected the darker color. I'm going to go ahead and put this to the side. We have selected the darker color for the hat pattern. And we're going to go ahead and sew those strips on. As you can see, I've got several already with the strips around. So we are almost ready to go to the ironing board to iron the pieces. Let's just get a couple more done here. And we're just trimming off the 2.5 inch strip to go ahead and open the piece and press down the seam line with our fingers. So we've got just a quick press. We're going to go down the second side. Making sure we're right on that quarter inch. Trim, finger press our seams open. And then lining up our fabric on our third side. Fold our threads. And zip right down the side. And with this quilt, it's a couch throw quilt. We want to take into consideration what it's going to be used for. And when you're on the couch and you snuggle up, you want to make sure you can grab a hold of that ends of the quilt, wrap it around you. And you also want it to be a little bit longer to incorporate your legs. So we want it to be longer than it is wide. And we're going to finger press this third seam. And then we'll do the fourth row. And then bring us on over to the ironing board. Iron our blocks, count our blocks, and go from there. But I am loving this hat block. Look at this. I am loving that block. All right. Cut off all my threads. Like I said, you always, always, always find more threads. Crazy. All right, and line this one up. Seams out, so they're up. Hold my thread. Line up the length. And with the 10-inch blocks, with your average width of fabric, 2.5-inch strips, you're going to go through 1 1/3 strips per block. So you do want to make sure you have at least 2 of each color. So it depends upon what size jelly roll you get. Whether you can have 2 blocks the same color or not. And again, you can always cut your fabric yardage into 2.5-inch strips yourself. Oftentimes that will save you money if you buy the yardage and cut down your fabric to 2.5-inch strips. It is a little bit more work, but again, when you save money, that's a great thing to consider. But again, you also want to take into consideration what colors you want, because you may have to be buying several different fabrics depending upon the number of colors you want in the 2.5-inch strips to use. All right, so that piece is ready, and we are ready to bring it over to the ironing board. And I do want to iron the train and then trim it down to the 10-inch block, and then we'll go around that one. Been going back and forth on colors, so I haven't decided yet. So we'll choose that once we get it ironed. And let's go ahead over to the ironing board and iron these seams flat, shall we? Oh, you want to see a couple? Okay, fine. Let me go ahead and move this over so you can see a couple of the different blocks that we're doing. I do have the hats, the travel, license plate. We like to eat. We like to travel. We like different flavors. So I've got some Louisiana. Who doesn't love music? So we have the music, more license plates, some correlating fabric colors to go in there, apple pies, more music. I've got corn dogs. I have the Louisiana, I believe it's Florette. You can correct me on that. Some more blues and jazz from New Orleans. We've got the Old Guy Rules fabric in here, American Legend, classic vintage. We have the onion rings, another Old Guy Rules. And as you can see, I've got a lot of threads that I need to trim. We've got apples. We love to go apple picking. We love nuts, fresh nuts. Who doesn't like junk food? You ever go to a sports game and not eat junk food? Hamburgers, hot dogs, french fries, more travel license plates, more food, donuts in the morning when you're traveling, you're going to an event. It's good to pick something up sweet to keep you going after that breakfast is worn off. And of course the diner, having a slice of pea and a glob of ice cream, that's wonderful. Love, love, love. Some more jazz and more license plates. So we've got a nice variety there. And let's go ahead and iron these and see what we have, shall we? Okay, so let's go ahead and get some of these ironed up for us. And we want to iron on the back. Ideally, iron out towards the 2.5-inch strip. So we're going to go out on all sides. A little bit of steam in the iron really helps. And let's see if the ironing board is long enough. All right. And if you hear the steam going, it's good to get steam in there because that's going to make it iron all that quicker. I am sewing and quilting on pretty much 100% cotton. So the cotton setting with steam makes quick work of our blocks. And again, anytime you have your pieces completely flat, that's how your long arm quilter wants to receive them. Completely flat, crisp from the iron. And that is the way to make your long arm quilter happy. All right. And then we'll have to lay out, see how we're going to have the colors. I think what I'm going to do is trim off some of the edges, make sure I'm perfectly square up on these. And I'm not sure if I'm going to go ahead and make some more blocks or if I'm going to use these, but I was thinking a minimum of 3 blocks across and 4 blocks down, but I might go to 4 and 6 pending my measurements. I haven't really thought it out that much, but again, 6 is going to make it more like a 72-inch length. And I was thinking more about the 40 by 60 range. But again, I think I will lay it out, snuggle with it just a second, and make sure the size is what I am looking for. Still need to trim some threads. Look at those donuts. Is that not great? That's so great. And I did use, as you can tell, some 2.5-inch strips. I cut off of some batik fabric. I had some yardage of black. I cut a little bit more of the black strips off because I thought they went with my blocks real well. But again, this is a very easy, very quick quilt. You just put your 2.5-inch strips around your 10-inch blocks. That's going to make a really quick border. And I am going to have an upcoming tutorial where we don't put the 2.5-inch strips all around the blocks, but we're going to have all of our 10-inch strips cut out, 10-inch blocks cut out, and then we're going to do one long strip between each, well, I should say, we're just going to do the strips here, and then we're going to have one strip the length of fabric. So we will do another quilt where we're using the same color 2.5-inch strips without all of this motley difference of color in the middle. And that'll make it a much more uniform quilt. But I was looking for the scrappy look, and that's what I'm going for on these blocks, is a real scrappy, fun, use up your mismatch strips. And a lot of times I'll have extra fabric, but I can get a 10-inch square out of them. I just can't necessarily get 2 or 3 10-inch squares out of them. Okay. And we are just about ready, about halfway through with these blocks. And then we can go ahead and start laying them out according to what colors look best where, and mix and match and get this top of the quilt done today. Because I am excited about getting a throw quilt in the man cave. And then we are going to do a ladies quilt with more flowers, and I have high heels and makeup in mind, and we're going to do one of those coming up real soon as well. Along with, I promised, a couple more baby quilts, because again, it seems to be that time where the nieces, I guess they're nieces, are having families. So we'll get some baby quilts done. Okay. And it sounds like my steam is wearing off just a little bit, so you can stop ironing, get yourself a cup of water, be real careful, pour in the water when the iron has cooled down a little bit, otherwise it's going to splatter back up at you. Okay. And we will keep ironing. All right, my friends, so you remember how this train block was too small, so we put the 1.5-inch strip all the way around it, and now we're trimming it down to size, and we're going to go ahead and take the ruler and trim off the last to where the whole project is 10 inches by 10 inches. Okay. So I'm going to lay my ruler down here to where it reaches 10 inches. Make sure we're square over here in the corner at 10 inches and square on that side. And we're going to go ahead and trim off the top so we have a perfect 10-inch square. And then we're going to go ahead and add our 2.5-inch borders. Okay, so we have gone ahead and trimmed down to a 10-inch square our train that we've already added some on the sides. And now we want to figure out which color is going to look best on our piece. And I don't want to go with a white. I want a contrasting piece. So I'm going to flip over the lightest colors. And I think I have to go with some of the darker. I'm thinking about maybe the gray for being in here. I wish I had another cup of blue, but I kind of wanted the earthy tone since it's outdoors with the train. Red would make it pop. Green, red, blue. I don't know. Let's go ahead and look at this and tell me what you think. How does that look? I think all of these would work, but I'm not buying it yet. So let's see if the dark gray, almost black here, would be too much. Is that too much of a contrast with the white? I'm not sure I like that either. And what about the gray? See, I think I'm going to have to go with the gray because the gray is going to pull in a little bit of the other grays, almost pull in the blue. I think we've got to go with the gray. So let's do that. We're going to throw our other pieces aside and go ahead and put our 2.5-inch strips around this one. So even when you have a piece of fabric, it's not the 2.5-inch strip, not the 10-inch strip that you want, you can still work with it. You just have to alter it a little bit to make it large enough to be that 10 by 10 to fit in with the rest of the pattern. And because we are going with a scrappy look with all different color 2.5-inch borders in between them, I think this is going to turn out perfect. Going to go ahead and trim off our selvage. And again, sometimes we think the color is going to work. We can always change our minds. And we're going to finger press that open so when we do the other sides, it lays much easier. Go across to make sure right sides are to right sides. And that we square up. And we're going to zip on across this piece, making sure we stay right on that 1/4 inch. Okay, and finger press that one open. And again, finger pressing just means that you're maybe pushing down with a fingernail, rubbing across it, like you would using a stiletto, or you're just pressing it with a finger to get those folds to stay where you want them to stay. trim this side off and finger press it, and then we're just going to do our fourth side, and then we're going to run it over to the ironing board, trim it, and then we will be ready to go ahead and lay out our blocks and see what colors we want touching what colors. Yay! Okay, looking pretty snazzy, I think. Wow. Okay. Right. Okay, and finger press this open. And we have a pretty snazzy looking block there. All right, let me run this over to the ironing board, and then we will commence to laying them out and sewing up the rows. Okay, my friends, we're going to do another block, and we're going to make this one out of the football. I've selected the lighter brown or the darker beige here. We're going to go ahead and quickly do our sides and get this one more block done. We're going to press open our seams. And we're pressing our seams towards our 2.5-inch strips and just laying them down with our fingernails, making sure right sides go together, meaning the pretty sides go together. Holding our strings. Going right down that side. And we're going to press our seams open. Going to trim off our excess on our 2.5-inch strip and do our third side. And we want right sides together. Threads to the back, if they want to go to the back. And we're going to finger press our seams open and start out with our whole strip to do that last side. And it is our longest because we have the 2.5 inch strips coming down on both sides. Did I do that one wrong? There we go. Make sure our seams are pressed the correct way. We're going to bring this one over to the iron, press it, and then we are going to piece together our quilt. I am so excited. What do you think? Oh! All right. Voila. Okay, so let us go ahead and set this down, and we are going to set out a couple of blocks, pin them together where we want to sew them together, and go from there. So I thought I could get 3 on the table. Maybe I can't. We will see. And we're going to pick out 24 of these blocks. We're going to have 4 across and 6 down. We got to make sure they're upright when they need to be upright with words on them or photos on them. Okay, so let's go for 1 food on the top, and I don't want to use the bacon and eggs right at the beginning. Maybe we will use don't want the pie. I am looking for, and I'm not finding it. Got the corn dogs, Louisiana, Old Men Rules, onion rings. This is so funny. Where, oh where have I hidden my hot dogs? There we go. So we definitely want the nuts and the hot dogs in there. So let's see how we're going to lay out these first couple of rows. Get the donuts in there too. I don't know. So let's see. We are going to have in the top row I think we want the top row to be hot dogs and hamburgers. Okay, this is what we're going to do for the top row. Top row is going to be in the upper left. We're going to put the travel. Then we're going to put the cheeseburgers and hot dogs. We're going to put the rattlers, and then we're going to put the hat. So this is our first row in order. So we can set that aside. That's our first row. And our second row will have maybe the train, have a solid, we'll have some nuts, and let's do an old guy's rule, shall we? Maybe old guy's rule right in between the train and the solid, and then the nuts on the side. So this is our second row. So we've got row 1 and row 2. Let's go for the third row. Oh, and we want to make sure these aren't touching. So in the first row, I had it on the second spot. So we're going to put this on the 4th spot on that side. So now I need 2 over here. And oh, ho, ho. We've got football, and music should be next to New Orleans, but I don't want the black with the black. So we'll put that down in the third row. And the donuts, they can be over there. 1, 2, third row, fourth row. Okay, so in the third row, we've got this on the fourth one, the third one, the first one. We want something in between these two. Shall we go with pie? Pie? We'll do pie. So we're going to do football, pie, and corn dogs in our third row. And we're going to put our third row right here. And then our fourth row is going to be donuts, a salad, musical notes, and then what do we want on the fourth? Let's do another driver's license plates. So we're going to do donuts, the salad, the musical notes, and then the license plates. Okay, so this is going to be our fourth row. 2 more rows to go, y'all. And we definitely want to use this one. So we're not going to be using this one in that row. Just did musical notes. We can do apples. Let's do apples and a salad. Do we want a black salad? I think we want a black salad. So let's go, blue looks so good with those musical notes. So maybe an apples. That apple just, bow! The apple is bright. Bright. Okay. Pick up my eggs. Oh, nobody likes it when they throw their eggs on the floor, right? 3-second rule, 5-second rule. Okay. Oh, that's too much food if I do the onion rings with the apples. Hum. I don't want 3 foods. So do we want an old guy rules in the fourth one? Why not? So we're going to do apples, old guy's rule, the fleur de lis, and the food. And this is our 5th row. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And now our 6th row. So clearly we're not using all of our pieces. So, and this is a guy's quilt. So I think I'll keep this peach or pink for later, not now. We've already used 1 pie. Oh, jazz music. Yes. Don't let me forget that one. Okay, so we're using jazz music. And do we use seafood? Fresh seafood? Fresh seafood maybe with the jazz. And then, do I want a solid piece in there? Another musical note. This one I think we'll hold off on. So it's down to these 3, but I've got music there, so I might wait on the music. Do I want to throw an onion ring in with, okay, so I think that's what I'm going to do. These we'll save for another time. And we're going to have our 6th row, maybe with the jazz, and then the onion rings, and then the license plate, and then the seafood. So let's go ahead and bring the sewing machine back up on table. We can start with our 6th row. It doesn't matter as long as all the pieces are together. Bring this back up, and let's go ahead and sew these together. So I know that this is first in the 6th row. So we're going to lay it over with our jazz, which comes in 2nd. And we're going to sew these 2 together. We're going to make the whole row. All right. We're going to turn on the sewing machine, do it just like we did the individual blocks. When I start, I'm going to hold on to my strings. And if we can remember where everything goes and in what order, we can chain stitch a couple of these to get these going. So we're doing our 1/4 inch seams. making sure where we come up here, it's laying flat. If we iron properly, press properly, it should be laying flat. Lock that last stitch in. Make sure if they need to be upright, they're upright. Most of these are upright, some of these are upside down. It doesn't really matter. And the onion rings are non-directional as well. So let's sew these two together, making sure we're starting out with a license plate. So the license plate is here. Okay, so we're good to go on that. We line these up real nice and sew these across. Scissors were hiding. We're going to trim off the first two, go ahead and take out the last two, and we're going to do our rows. And with our rows, upright. And I think I just rearranged them and I am very happy with it. And this is going to be our 6th row. And just like that, we are halfway done with our 6th row, almost complete there. Okay. And since we're starting with our 6th row, I'm going to go ahead and pick up the 5th row. And we're going to start on the 5th row. Now this was the first block, so we're going to turn it this direction. We're just really making sure where I lay them to the next row and to the row above it, that there's no clash of color. Mainly meaning in this quilt, I'm not worried about a clash of color as much as I'm worried about two identicals being the same if they have too much of that color there in one spot. Ooh. Okay, and these two. Bacon on top, bacon on the bottom. Don't think it matters. We're going to sew this sides together. But again, I'm just kind of talking aloud some of my thoughts. So as you're going through these process, this is some of the thoughts you're going to have. And I'm going to go ahead and rethread my needle. And it looks like it's curled around. And we're going to go ahead and keep doing the other rows identical to this thought process. And then we'll get our rows sewn together. These two put together and see how our first row is looking. Not too shabby for a fun man cave kind of throw quilt. And line up the remaining pieces for our 5th row. To our 4th row. And which side was donuts on? Donuts were on the first side, so we're going to fold it this way. And sometimes you need to pull the underneath one towards you with your fingers to where your 2 lines are perfectly aligned. Keeping that 1/4 inch stitch. And I just want to show you the 5th row. Oops, upside down. Starting here. All right, so we have all of our rows sewn together, or rows created, and now we're going to sew all the rows together to create our top of our quilt. And then we'll decide if we want borders. And our ManCave quilt is shaping up. Make sure your seams are lined up. And keep that 1/4 inch seam allowance straight. Okay, so here we have a quilt that we're going to turn into a man cave throw quilt. And I think it's coming together rather well. I have 4 blocks across. It's a very simple beginner quilter pattern. And it's just 4 10-inch blocks across, 6 10-inch blocks down, all with a theme of whatever your man likes. And then you want to go around each piece with a 2.5-inch strip, adding some pop and some color and some pizzazz to the blocks. And we'll come up very soon with our next ManCave quilt without the 2.5-inch strips between each of the blocks. We'll have them just 1 length between all of the blocks, and that quilt will be more uniform, more traditional, but this is for a pop of color as a throw and snuggle quilt while you watch maybe some football. And when you readjust your blocks to make sure they're perfectly lined up when you're sewing them in your seams, you want to always leave your needle down, and that way if your quilt falls, you're not pulling or torquing it. As you are quilting your quilt, make sure that you hold up or tuck under the bulk so there's no weight pulling or torquing against your sewing. And when I quilt, I like to wind it up on the table, fold it over and fold it over so that I don't have the bulk falling off the table and causing any issues. So I like to keep it on the table. And let's line up our seams. Make sure both your top and your bottom pieces are perfectly lined up, and try and keep that. Constantly readjust every couple of inches as you go down your project. Pins or needles in your seam lines are very, very beneficial, because we want to match up our seams and make sure they are laying perfectly together. And if we have sewn and laid them correctly, these seams will lay perfectly together, one up, one down, one up, one down, and will be perfectly aligned. I can get us focused here. There we go, pop into focus. So we're lining up these 2 seams. One of them is going up, one of them is going backwards as we sew. And again, keep your 2 fabrics completely close together. Keep your 1/4 inch and hold on to that fabric. As you get near the end, don't let go, so you maintain your 1/4 inch. Okay, and now we have our ManCave throw quilt put together. We're going to go ahead and bring it over to the ironing board and steam press those seams, and then debate if we want another border unifying that quilt all the way around, or if we're going to be good with just a binding, and what color binding do we want to have on this quilt. I'm excited. What about y'all? Hope you've enjoyed this journey.